Yeah.
It is time to review The Fall Off. So much hype has been built around an album titled after something that usually follows failure. The album trailer and disc 2 track 2, which is the only song, and I mean like only song on the track list for the Fall Off album, came out on January 14th. I really like the album trailer, actually. I like the way it's shot. It's framed very nicely. But Dan Harmony is the guy narrating over it, and he's basically talking about the impermanence of stardom. And one thing he says specifically is that how we like look down on people as a society, and we look down on them for like falling off instead of just, I guess, appreciating that they made it to that place anyway, that we got to hear this person's sound and perspective or whatever it may be in show business and even in life. I think it could be applied to. But when he says look down on these people, it cuts to a shot of J. Cole, of a low angle of J. Cole, and he's not looking down on us. And I think there can be some parallels drawn there that we'll go over later on that like whole looking up to him kind of deal. It could have been purposeful, it could have been not. It could have just been because he was like, oh, I want to get the trees back there with the sky, and I think that would look really nice. The opening note from disc 2 track 2, which also came out on the same day, January 14th, basically reads J. Cole from now, the end to the beginning, saying you better have learned something in the middle to like make this ending possible. And I have to emphasize ending in quotations because I don't think it's truly the end. But I'd like to talk more about that after we go over everything. Another thing about this album is the release date. There's a little fun fact. It's tied to the release date of it. It's 2/6/26, February 6th, 2026. I was reading this Complex article, which is where I got a lot of the information I learned about this album from. But basically, in the article, it says it's a callback to his nickname when he was in North Carolina. It was apparently 2/6. So you now have that information. So the fall off, as many know, has been in the works for over a decade as far as like putting the words together, actually. 2016, as far back as I could tell. The Complex article will be linked below if you want to like follow along with all the information that I had gotten to kind of build this little timeline. The earliest stuff that the Complex article talks about, 2016, these two tracks called False Prophets and Everybody Dies, Jermaine's interlude, where he raps this. Said all that I could say, now I play with thoughts of retirement. False Prophets is more about artists who don't take accountability, who aren't held accountable, and people who idolize them coming up or like younger, I guess. Let's say you're like a rapper or something and you see all the stuff that Kanye West sees, and you have like family and friends around you, and I guess also your own judgment to be like, that's wrong. I don't really like this guy anymore, right? There's another person who's in a different circle. Maybe they don't have people around them to kind of steer them straight when they see things like this, and they follow that same path, but you may not hear about it until they do something crazy enough to like match that energy for you to actually hear about it, right? So I feel like it's one of those things you just don't necessarily see it if you're not actively looking for it, or until it's like a too late type of deal. And then Everybody Dies, I feel like he's talking about industry plans, fake rappers rapping about lifestyles that you don't actually live. Now both of those songs came out in 2016 before For Your Eyes Only. The next step in the timeline would come in 2018 with KOD 1985 Intro to the Fall Off, which is it's not a diss necessarily, but more of a response to Lil Pump's diss on J. Cole, where he basically invites you to fuck J. Cole repeatedly. Nigga, fuck J. Cole. Nigga, fuck J. Cole. Nigga, fuck J. Cole. Nigga, fuck J. Cole. Yeah, fuck J. Cole. Yeah, fuck J. Cole. I don't know what he was on, but hey, big dog, I'm good. All you. In the song, J. Cole basically criticizes Lil Pump's lifestyle, but like relates to it because he's been in his shoes and he knows how it feels and what that trajectory leads to. And he offers advice actually. And he's like, okay, well, in 5 years, the money's going to start drying up. the venues ain't gonna be looking as big, and instead of buying all these like chains and cars, invest in a house, invest in your future, so that when the rap game is done for you, you've got something to fall back on. I'm like, I'm just like, wow, J. Cole's just a really swell guy, isn't he? But then he's like, oh, by the way, I'm still gonna be hot.
I'll be around forever, cause my skills is tip top.
He basically says that by rapping about how he's been sharpening his sword so much to the point where like you can still stick around. And I feel like this is another piece of advice. In so doing, he's saying to Lil Pump, like, I think my interpretation of it is you can take that path, buy your cars, your chains, or whatever, and go broke. Basically, you could invest in your future, or with like the foundation that you do have some skill, and you can sharpen that sword some more and build off of those skills to continue to thrive in the industry, right? And then he throws, I think, a diss at like 11 hip hop members, uh, by saying to Pump that like if you follow this projected path of just buying the cars and the chains and you run out of money, then you're gonna end up on like 11 hip hop to make like ends meet, I guess. And I'm not really sure what that whole situation is, but I was like, damn. So that comes out in 2018, and then we go to 2019 with Middle Child. In the Complex article, they say that during the documentary for the off season that came out in 2021, that J. Cole said Middle Child was intended for the fall off, and I guess it's just not. The same with Everybody Dies and False Prophets, they were intended for it. So in Middle Child, there's the line, money in your hand doesn't make you real. And I thought about it, and call me crazy, but here's my little conspiracy theory on what that implies. I think the line speaks to, I don't know if the term already exists or if there's a term for it, but like image rap, rapping to portray an image instead of sending a message. Money in your hand doesn't make you real. It doesn't make you necessarily talented, but it does make you marketable because they can market that image. And I think Cole here is also criticizing like black rappers in the industry for marketing a false image of black culture. I think if I were to ask you what's the first thing that pops in your mind when you think about like a rap video, you're probably thinking girls, probably guns, cars, jewelry, right? This was not the most efficient way to list four things. And I'll be the first one to say I'm not the most educated on like black culture, but as I was like researching and getting information on the history of the fall off, I couldn't help but to like hear J. Cole talking about these things and getting invested in it a little bit myself. A side note, a quick related side note, my dad is my black parent. He wants me to be more knowledgeable on like my black half of like lineage and history. I'd say I'm, at least as of right now, I'm pretty ignorant to it, but shit, maybe J. Cole got me. Maybe J. Cole got me. All right, maybe he did. With your art being more marketable because of its image rather than its substance, I think J. Cole is criticizing that marketability of the image rap and saying that it bastardizes black culture and makes it easier to sell, even though what's being sold isn't real or isn't the whole story. And you might be asking, what is that whole story? And I think J. Cole connects that in 2020's Lewis Street EP. So on the Lewis Street EP, there's two songs, The Climb Back and The Lion King on Ice. The Climb Back, one of the first lines I heard was,
To the left of that decimal, I need 7 figures to play the joint.
And I think he's speaking to the idea of like you have something you love. In this case, it would be like rapping, right? But you wouldn't do it unless you got paid for it, kind of thing. And it's like everybody's got to eat, right? But would you still do it even if you weren't getting paid for it? Would you go out of your way, even if rap wasn't lucrative would you still rap? Would you still do it for the love of the game itself? If you had to go to your McDonald's shift for 8 hours, if you had to go to Walmart and work for 9, if you had to be lifting tires all day, and stay over for like 2 hours because some guy comes in and wants all 18 tires done right before closing, would you still come home and be like, I'm going to spit some bars today, or I'm going to work on this beat, or whatever it might be? Would you still do it for the love of the game? Is it about the money, or is it about the love for the rhymes and the money just came with it? And it's not, I don't think it's necessarily a problem to get into a market or industry because it's lucrative. That's sort of how investing works, I believe. As sort of like the artist yourself, a question like you need to ask yourself, are you doing this because you want to and because you like it or love it, or are you doing it because you just see the benefits of it? And I feel like once again in this song, he's also pointing to that image rap concept that I mentioned, and how it creates a cycle of ignorance. And by that, I mean, let's say I wanted to be a rapper, or actually not even that far. Let's say I'm figuring out what I really want to do, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm like scrolling on YouTube every day. I'm watching like MTV on the TV, and I'm looking and I'm seeing all these like rappers. They got the girls, they got the cars, how they're like in these streets and nobody could touch them, and they're like that fucking guy, right? I don't think it's too far of a line to draw to say that impressionable youths, or people looking for a way out might be drawn to that kind of thing, right? To be drawn to that kind of lifestyle, to be drawn to that kind of money and access, right? From the interpretations I got from The Lion King on Ice, I feel like Cole is talking about the self-destructive nature of Black culture. Of course, I believe he's saying,
I got blood on my hands, I ain't gonna lie, I got mud on my shoes.
And I think what he's referring to is inaction earlier in his life, seeing self-destructive habits within his circle of people he knew, and not taking any action, and sort of indirectly getting blood on his hands and on his shoes. The cycle of gang violence, addiction, and I've felt that myself a little, but that's real, right? And I feel like that's part of that image that is created, where it's like girls, you're popping bottles, the street life, the lavish lifestyles with the chains and the cars, the big houses and all that. And you see that, but you don't ever see the backside. You don't get the full picture, right? And I feel like that's sort of where that ignorance can come from, is like you only see the good, that you never really address the bad. And it's sort of like you can't really solve a problem that you haven't acknowledged existed yet. So the more that that image is created, and I think as far as J. Cole is speaking, maybe he's speaking more broadly, but as far as like Black rappers in the industry and pushing that idea, that image, right? It creates that cycle of image rap that and ignorance that never gets solved, because this person, the rapper who's influencing the younger people, influences younger people. These guys replicate what they see, because the guy right here replicated what he saw, and it just, like I said, just keeps creating that cycle. At least that's what I think he's speaking to. A quick little straighten out here. 2016, Jermaine's Interlude. That came off of DJ Khaled's Major Key album, Everybody Dies, False Prophets, that came out in 2016. Intended for Fall Off, but I guess not actually put on there. And then you go 2018, 1985, Intro to the Fall Off, 2019's Middle Child, intended, but not actually confirmed. And then you go to 2020 with the Lewis Street EP, The Climb Back, and Lion King on Ice. Those two tracks, at least from the Complex article, are confirmed to be a part of the fall off. So I imagine in order it would be like 1985, Intro to the Fall Off, and then the Climb Back, Lion King on Ice, and then Disc 2, Track 2. I don't know if those songs, I'm recording this on the 5th, so I don't know if those songs are going to be included on the album, but all right, last thing we got here before we really start getting into the meat and bones of the album itself is Birthday Blizzard. So for this mixtape, I feel like J. Cole is criticizing the industry and even audiences themselves for engaging with polarization over passion. The drama around the arts and rap, it gets more engagement than the art itself, I think, is what he's trying to make a point to. I would have to attribute it to oversaturation. J. Cole also kind of bites back at the people who, for whatever reason, were like, oh man, you're a bitch. I can't believe you apologized to Kendrick. Like, dog. And this is that drama thing, right? Because with the whole, I mean, like in reality TV, it's like, you bitch, how dare you throw like fucking drinks and wine and alcohol at each other, and then the next episode it's like, so I overreacted, and it's like, okay, dog, whatever, right? But that's TV, that's edited, fuck that, whatever. This is like, he maybe, like, I don't want to like speak for him, right? But like, he said something that he didn't mean, or didn't mean like after, and so he apologized like a normal human being, and he took it back because he didn't mean it, or he didn't mean it the way he said it, whatever the case might be. He didn't like what was said, how it was said, whatever the case, and he walked it back because he didn't want something that he didn't truly feel to be out there, or to have been said without change or editing, right? So are you gonna say like fuck you to your homie because you got angry or something, and then just leave it? Or you're just not gonna come back to that? The last thing you're gonna say to him is like fuck you, and then you're gonna come back and pretend like everything's fine? Like, no, you've got angry, whatever the situation would have been, and you said something you didn't mean, so you have to be a normal human being and apologize for something that you might have said wrong. So I could not understand, if you don't have to have more problems or more enemies in your life, then why would you, by choice?